Hi, Walter.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm glad that you were able to make it today. I want to ask, first of all, if we can start with introductions. What's your actual full name? What's your full name?
Walter Karp.
That's it. You
That's
have no
it.
middle name.
I just use an initial M.
Okay. All right. Did you have any nicknames growing up as a
Nope.
kid?
No, it was always Walter.
You were, okay. All right. What's your current family status? Let's put it that way.
Well, I have 3 children and 2 boys and a girl. They're married. 2 of them live in Jersey, and my oldest son, who with my grandson and his wife, live about 5 minutes from me. I'm widowed. I've been widowed about 10 and a half years.
I remember when you lost your wife.
Yeah, she passed away in a car accident.
That's something that none of us are ever ready for when that kind of a tragedy befalls. Talk about the children for a minute. Tell me about their names, their ages, their order.
My 2 boys, the oldest, and they're both CPAs. One of them works for Barclays Bank. He's in management of Barclays.
And which one is that?
My son, Larry. And my son, Scott, is a manager at Cooper's in Libran.
Oh, here in Melville?
No, in Manhattan.
In Manhattan.
And my daughter, who's the youngest, is a manager of one of the Huntington Learning Centers in Jersey. So they're all doing okay.
And are their children?
I have 1 grandson, and I have.
And who is the?
My oldest son, Larry, has a 3.5-year-old. His name is Stephen. And I'm going to be a grandfather twice again.
Oh,
around September. They're both due in September. Both my boys' wives are due in September. So I'm really looking.
You have a
forward
lot
to
to
it.
look forward to.
Yeah.
Tell me about the personalities of your children. How are they different? How are they dissimilar?
Well, my oldest son is a corporate type, but very, very laid back. My middle one, he's my son Scott, thinks he came out of GQ.
Okay. All right.
And he's kind of a character that way.
Best dressed, huh?
Yeah. He's right up to the minute when it comes to
Great.
fashion. He says, what are you wearing that for? It doesn't go. Well, my daughter also helps me dress because I'm partially colorblind. So
all right.
Before she moved to Jersey,
Okay.
As I said, she's managing a Huntington Learning Center. She really didn't care for the classroom that much. She had a short time in the classroom, didn't like it, but she really enjoys that. So that's what she's doing. Her husband is an attorney in Jersey.
Now, in terms of the interest, do they follow in Dad's footsteps in terms of the things that they're interested in, hobbies or interests? Or
No, I think I follow in theirs.
really, how's that?
My middle son, Scott, is an avid golfer. And I decided now that I'm about to retire, I'm going to take up golf. Right?
Great.
So that's one thing. My oldest son actually does his own thing. He's very interested into coin collecting, which I never really got into except to give him money,
Sure.
And,
But old coins. You're talking about old coins? Or?
mostly pennies. He's got that. What is it? I don't know, it's worth probably $1,000 a penny. 1909 SVBD or something like that. So he was really into it since he's been about 7.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, I ask this question of everybody, Walt. The traits, sometimes in our family, we have family traits that you see from generation to generation. Are there any family traits that you recognize in your own children, or maybe even in your grandchild at this point? And I don't know how you would describe
physically, I think I look a little like my grandfather.
Okay.
And my oldest son, I think, looks like I used to look, because I was 20 pounds lighter.
Weren't we all?
And I was all muscle. Now I'm 20 pounds heavier and all fat.
No, I would.
And my middle son, Scott, looks a lot like his mother and has his mother's traits, his mother's personality, which is...
That's what I was referring to, the personality, to describe that.
But luckily, they have their mother's brains. Great. So that's good, instead of their father's.
Okay.
I think my older one is more like me, more laid back, and my middle one is more of a pusher in a lot of ways. And my daughter is kind of a mixture.
Do you have much contact at this point with your
Yeah.
grandpa? You do?
Yeah, well, my grandson only lives about 5 minutes away,
Oh, that's.
so I usually see him about once a week.
Mm-hmm.
My other two, I'm lucky about once a month, but we do talk on the phone at least twice a week to each of them, so that's nice.
That is nice. And you'll have even more time now.
Yeah, well, I'll be able to get to Jersey.
Let me ask you about you for a moment.
Okay.
Where were you born?
Manhattan. That's what my mother tells me.
Okay.
But I was brought up in Queens, in Flushing.
Okay. And what would be the time frame that you were born? When did?
I was born in 39.
39.
And
do you have any account of some of your earliest memories as a child?
Well, I remember just before we moved to Queens, I guess I was about 2 or 3, and my mother was hanging out wash. They didn't have dryers in those days.
Right.
And I tried to help my mother, so I threw all the wash out of the window instead of hanging it out.
Yes. Oh, that's a big help.
Yeah, well, I think that's the earliest recollection that I have.
What was your mother's full name, Walt?
Ruth. Her maiden name was Greenbaum.
Okay. And was she born in this country?
Yeah, both my parents were born here. I'm much closer with my maternal
side of the
family, and my maternal grandparents were born in Germany.
Do you have much of a knowledge of your family history?
No, unfortunately, very, very little.
Yeah.
And it's got to the point where I'm the oldest one in the family.
Yeah, I know that happens to all of us, doesn't it? And thank goodness for that.
You know, we're Jewish and we have a Seder. I think you know what that is.
Sure, of course.
And about 2 years ago, it was at my house, and I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I realized that was my grandfather.
Oh, yeah. That's a great.
So it was a kind of a startling revelation, and sometimes not so great. You're getting older.
How do you remember your mother as a child? What are the kind of memories you have of her?
My mother was a very loving person. She really was, but not physical. There was a lot of love in my family, but never any physical touching or kissing or anything like that. I'm amazed at what they did with what they had. You know, my parents I didn't realize it. They were poor. Yeah, they were really poor, and I didn't realize it. And I didn't realize it until probably 35.
Is that right?
How much they had accomplished with what they had. So,
was there something? How did she express herself as a person? Did she have a way of? Was there something that?
Well, she looked at you the wrong way. You knew it. You know it. So my dad was more easygoing.
What I'm thinking of here, what I'm trying to express is, did she have an interest? Like she was a collector? Did she paint? Was it with food? Was it with sewing or doing things? Or?
Mom collected everything.
She did.
Yeah, I recently had to dispose of her house, and there was a corner that had to be at least 3 foot square and at least 3.5 feet high with old hangers.
My goodness.
Now, what the heck you were going to do with old hangers? I had no idea. Why I asked?
Yes.
She had paper that was yellow. Now, what? I mean, she just saved everything. Probably, you know, because of the poverty, you just saved everything.
Oh yes. If you've lived through the Depression, it put a stamp on everyone.
I'm sure it did.
What about your dad? What was he like?
My dad was kind of strange in that he worked nights and slept during the day.
And what did he do?
He was basically a laborer. And then toward the end, he got, and then we had a small business for a while, fixing washing machines and dryers, until I basically left the house, and then he couldn't do it by himself anymore. And finally, he wound up in the transit authority, and he did very well there.
Working for the city.
Yes. Yeah, he worked for the railroad.
Were you? I gathered that you've already answered this, but do you have much of a knowledge of the family background on his side of the family?
Not much, no.
Was he born in this country?
Oh, he was born in this
He was,
country.
yeah.
My grandmother,
On your father's side?
on my father's side, I think she was born in England and brought up in Ireland, or the other way around. I think that my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, was actually born in Poland, on the Poland-Russian border. But that's really all I know about it.
Your parents met in this country, of course, and your
My
grandparents.
parents were high school
Sweethearts.
yeah. But unfortunately, in those days, they had to go to work to support the family.
Sure. Oh yeah.
And so they only went up to about the 9th grade.
Right.
Because they had to go out to work.
As did many people of that generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet my mother was probably one of the most astute women that I have ever met. And she read,
She did.
Yeah. And I minored in psychology, and my mother was the best psychologist I've ever met.
There's the influence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. What are some of the earliest memories you might have of your father?
I remember my dad laying on the couch and kind of snuggling up next to him.
Yes.
That's about the earliest.
That's a wonderful memory.
Recollection.
Yours was a small family, was it, Walt?
I have a brother, and that was okay.
Mm-hmm. What's your brother doing today?
My brother's an OBGYN in Westchester.
Okay.
So he did pretty well.
He's still working. He's not. He's
got 2 kids, and he's got to support them.
When you were growing up, what'd you learn from your brother as you watched him growing up?
I learned I wasn't as bright as he was.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a similar experience in my family.
Right.
Well, you mentioned before that growing up in your family, it was a very loving family, and that's the memory that you have of what it was like. Were there any adult influences outside of immediate family members that played an important part in your formative years?
My grandfather was actually, my maternal grandfather was actually probably the person that I try to model myself after.
And what was it that he did now?
He stowed away on a ship and came to the United States. He was one of the people who started the union for motion picture operators.
Is that right?
And when I was a kid, he used to take me all over. He would take me to the mountains, and
he also must have told you a lot of stories.
Yeah. And I'll bet he was a character. He was a character. Yeah. He loved gadgets. He was a gadget person, and he bought a brand new car every year. Every year he'd buy a new car. Really? Oh, I'm sorry, every other year. Every other year. And the first thing he would do is get a cardboard box, go up to around Albany or Liberty, find a chicken farm. It's really shows. Fill the cardboard box up with chicken. Yes. Put it in his brand new car so that it smelled like, for his garden. Isn't that wonderful? Then it took about 6 months till the smell went out.
Yes. How come you became a teacher? What influenced your choice of career?
My parents thought teaching was a noble profession. And originally I wasn't going to go into teaching. I started off as an accounting major.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, they didn't have calculators when I went to school. Oh, well, they did, but they were very expensive. And
the slide rules and logarithms and all that.
So I'm in an intermediate accounting class, adding up these rows of numbers and saying to myself, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And I had minored in psych. And I said, maybe I can put that together and teach. And that's how it started. So I took a course in ed and liked it. And
so you were already working in the field of accounting when?
No. I was in college. I majored in business.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I became a business teacher.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh. Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask you about some of your best friends when you were growing up. Who were your best friends?
Unfortunately, I had two or three. I didn't
Okay,
have very
you're lucky to
many.
have 2 or 3 good ones. That's
And I don't know where they are anymore.
okay.
I have no idea. Sort of lost track of them when I got out of high school, and one went into two went into the Air Force. One guy spoke 4 languages. He was Hungarian.
Tell me what their names
And
were, Walter. Who were they?
Well, Bud Kennedy
Okay.
was one, and he went into the Air Force, and he went to Spain, married some girl, and came back with 3 kids.
Wow.
And the other was Steve. I'm trying to remember Steve's last name. He was the Hungarian fella. He came over during the Hungarian Revolution with his father,
56.
and unfortunately, his mother his mother wanted to stay behind.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and they were both kind of alcoholics. Yeah, I wasn't, but they were. And Steve spoke 4 languages, I think.
Yeah.
So he enlisted in the Air Force, and this, everybody says this, but this is really true. They made him a cook.
It's incredible.
They made him a cook because they found out that he had one summer where he worked as a short order
Amazing how
person in
the twists and turns.
and I haven't seen them since, so I don't know.
Here's a question for you. Describe the room that you slept in when you were a kid.
Okay. Today they would call it a Florida room, but in those days it was called a porch. All right, the house I was in was not large, and my parents let me decorate it just about any way I wanted, and so I decorated it with World War II paraphernalia.
Uh-huh.
I had the helmets and the daggers and the whole 9 yards.
Model planes? Were you into model?
No. These were actually
Actual relics, as
it were. In fact, I still have some of the helmets and stuff. I hope.
Where was the house that you grew up in?
It was in Flushing.
Okay, this is after you moved from Manhattan, then you moved to.
Well, Manhattan. I was born in, and I think we moved in when I was about 3, maybe 4.
Oh, okay. So your earliest memories that really are in Flushing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I just sold that house about 2 months ago.
Oh, so it was in the family all these years.
Yeah, well, what happened was...
Because your
mom passed away.
Yeah.
Then my oldest son lived there for a while. And when my oldest son left, my middle son went in. And then my daughter went in.
Oh, thank goodness.
And my daughter moved out about a year and a half ago.
If those walls could talk, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
And how?
What were the family chores that you were responsible for growing up? What did you have to do? Were there certain
I used to hate putting away the pots.
Yes.
That was one of my, I'd have to put away pots. When my mother was cooking, I hated that. I hated that with a passion.
Do you remember your first paying job?
My first
job you got paid something for doing?
I think it was for watering the neighbor's lawn when I was a kid. And then was for watching somebody's animal.
Huh? What family holiday, as you were growing up, what family holiday do you remember as being the most fun?
The most fun? I don't know that I could pick one.
All right.
I really don't.
Was there a time of year when family gathered?
Well, when my grandparents were alive, we would get together, I would guess at least 2 or 3 times a month.
Oh.
And then...
See, I thought you were going to tell me over the holidays. You were going to say that over the religious holidays you would get together.
They did that too. My parents were not religious at all.
Okay.
They were practically agnostic.
Okay.
Now,
after school, when you came from school, what did you do with the time that you had? How did you spend your time? What were your interests?
Well, from the time I was in high school to the time I finished college, my dad had this small business, and
so that's what you did. So on a summer day, for example, you were working.
I was working. I didn't have too much what you would call playtime.
Right. So that if I would ask you about the difference in the seasons and what you remembered, from in spring or in fall or winter? Was
The only thing I remember is shoveling snow.
Okay.
And so, that was basically. And when I was very small, my brother had bad lungs when I was very, very small. And so the doctor said that he had to have, believe it or not, go to the mountains when the air was better.
Yeah, sure.
And so for a couple of years when I was very young, we went to the mountains. My brother's 4 years younger than I am. And for about 2 or 3 years, we went to...
Whole family would go up?
Well, Mom and my brother and I would go up, and my dad would come over the weekends.
Yes, sure. What kind of a kid were you, Walt, growing up? How would you describe yourself, looking back?
The schlep. I was a fat little kid.
Okay.
All right. I was the one that was picked last on the baseball team, that type of thing.
Okay. Do you remember the toys that you enjoyed playing with when you were growing up? Certain favorite toys? And of course, whatever time period you might remember, it differs as kids grow out of certain things.
No, I really don't.
Okay.
I really don't remember any particular.
Well, then tell us.
The thing that I do remember is fishing and fishing equipment, but that was a little bit later because that was something I did with my dad, and the same thing, hunting.
Okay.
We used to go hunting. The only thing I ever caught was a cold.
Yeah.
But it was
You mentioned your mother liked to read. Did you read as a kid too?
Yeah.
You did.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Believe it or not, mostly Western novels.
Let me
I couldn't even tell you what they are anymore.
Well, this might be a tough question, or it might not, but of all the books that you've read in your life, which one of them had the most profound effect on your life? Another way of saying that was,
I know what you're
one
saying.
of the best books you ever read,
I know what you're saying.
Okay.
And I don't know that any of them had a really profound effect. The most recent things that I've done, which is the last 10 years, I guess, 15 years, is I have a hobby of palmistry. So I read a lot of I read palmistry books. But I haven't had a lot of time to read.
No. That will all change now.
Yes, I'm hoping.
The first school that you attended, where was that?
PS 107 in Flushing.
Do you remember the first couple of years?
Yeah.
Any snippets of things that happened during the early years there? That would have been during whose presidency, by the way? That would have been, let's see, if that was in the 40s, was it?
Yeah.
So
Truman, maybe?
It would probably have been Truman.
Maybe Truman, yeah. I remember a lot of religious prejudice and getting beat up because of it.
Okay.
That I remember.
Picked on because you were Jewish?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this was essentially not a Jewish neighborhood where you grew up then?
Mostly Italian and German. No, I'm sorry. Irish and German. A few Italian people.
Mm-hmm.
I think my cousin and myself were probably the only Jewish people in the whole school.
And after that elementary school, where did you go then?
Well, then I went to Bayside High because at that time they went to the 8th grade. Yes. And then you went to high school in the 9th grade. So I went to Bayside High.
Do you have any memories of teachers from either elementary school or high school? Do you remember any of the teachers you had?
No, not really.
You didn't have a favorite teacher?
Especially in high school. Well, during high school, I would come home and go to work. And
school is secondary, really.
Well, it wasn't.
Okay.
And the other problem was I picked the wrong school in a way. Because I had to walk about 1.5 miles to get the bus. Not to get to school, but to get the bus. So when you walk...
You mean those things that parents say to kids are actually true? I had to walk 1.5 miles
to get the bus. That's true. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I lived near Casino Park, and I had to walk up to Northern Boulevard, which had to be a healthy mile or maybe 1.5 miles. So by the time you walk there and walk back, you're not going to stay around too much.
Right. But would you say you enjoyed high school, or it was just
No.
something you had to do?
It was something I had to do.
Okay.
And in fact, I looked around in my senior year because I really was not a student.
Mhm.
That's probably why I do well with the
Mhm.
kids, the lower end kids, because I understand them. I am one.
Yes.
I'm a sweat hog.
Yes.
I really am. I'm one of the sweat hogs. And I looked around my senior year and I said, holy mackerels, I can't make a living. I better do something.
Uh-huh.
And so I was very, very lucky. In a way, I was lucky. My grandfather, the one that I told you
Yeah.
about, that I had recently passed away, left me a very small inheritance. So I was able to get into a private college. I went to CW Post, and they asked me two questions. The first question was, while you're breathing? And the second question was, can you pay for the tuition?
Yes.
And since the answer was yes to both, I was lucky and got accepted.
Now, CW Post was the Long Island branch of LIU at
Right.
that time, and it had probably
Still is,
just
isn't it?
started. Yeah.
I was the second full graduating class.
The second full graduating class. Okay. Yes. That was a small campus, a beautiful.
Oh,
campus.
everybody knew everybody else. It was the old estate.
Yes.
It was the estate. It was very pretty.
Now, when did you first come to Brentwood?
Oh, 35 years ago. It was just 35 years ago.
What brought you to Brentwood? Why did you come here?
I had gotten out of college, and I had gone for most of my master's. I didn't finish the thesis or anything, but I had gotten all the credits out of the way. Wanted to teach, and a lot of the Korean vets were coming back at that time.
Uh-huh.
And rightfully so, they got first preference, and jobs were really difficult to get at that time in the business area. And I finally wound up upstate New York, first year upstate New York in a small town called Dryden. This is now a 2-year college, but then all there was a cattle auction.
And then the sec, yes.
And I got married up there. Well, I got married while I was up there. I brought my wife from Brooklyn up there, which was quite a culture shock. Not so much for me, because when I grew up in Flushing, there were farms.
That's right.
There were actually farms in Flushing, but for her, it was a culture shock. She didn't like it up there. And so I went on some interviews, and Brentwood accepted me. I said, we're home.
Okay.
Although, it was home, but it was to me, it was home. To her, Brooklyn was still home. And, but she was back in civilization.
Brentwood, what was Brentwood doing? Advertising or letting people know that there were openings here, or had you inquired? You had sent letters of inquiry to, you don't remember that. So I don't know how it happened.
I think what happened was I had interviewed, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong on this. I had interviewed for a position at the Mauritius, and Stanley Abrams was the superintendent. And he said to me, you have the job. And so my wife and I went out and celebrated. And then about 2 weeks later, he said, I'm really sorry. Yes, the Board of Education decided we weren't going to expand the department.
Oh, boy.
And I think he said, but apply to Brentwood.
Okay, there it is, a referral.
And I think that's how it came about, but I wouldn't say
Now, do you remember who interviewed you for your position here in Brentwood? Did you go through an interview?
John Morocco.
Okay.
John Morocco.
Uh-huh.
I think it was Morocco who interviewed me.
And then you took a look at the district or the area, and you had an impression of Brentwood. What was your impression of Brentwood when you looked around?
At that time, it was a rural community.
Okay. First impression,
It was a rural community at the time, and I had an acquaintance who lived in Brentwood at the time. But Brentwood was not, as you know, it was not the same Brentwood that it is now. Not at all. Very different.
But Brentwood always, my recollection is that Brentwood was always called a microcosm of what was happening across America. Do you think that that's still the case today?
I don't know. I really don't know. In some ways, I hope not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I came to Brentwood, the faculty, the staff, the administration, we were family. Okay. If you did something wrong, they would ream you out. I mean, if you really did something terrible, but they would ream you out. But it was almost like, I wouldn't say a father doing it, but
It was a paternal.
All right, and you were put on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
I see it now as a business. I don't see it as a cooperative, something that's cooperative anymore. I see it as strictly a business type of thing where if, at least at the high school level, now on the central level, one thing I will say about central is they have tried to keep personnel, and that's sort of like family. But I haven't seen too much of it on the high school level. On the high school level, I find that it's very cutthroat, basically, and it's very different.
When you first came here, what subjects did you teach?
Actually, I taught business in North Junior High. Well, it's now North Middle School. At that time, it was North Junior High. And then I was there for about 6 or 7 years, and then I came up to the high school.
And has your certification remained the same? That is, you're certified as a business teacher?
Well, I was always certified as a business teacher and as a social studies teacher.
Oh, okay.
I always had dual certification.
I see.
Which is one of the reasons that they put me in social studies. Well, even when I was in North Junior High, I taught social studies for if they needed one class.
Okay.
Usually they gave me the more difficult youngsters. But as I say, I'm a sweat hog.
Yeah.
I'm a sweat hog, so I do fairly well with them.
Who did you work with during those early years? Who were some of the other teachers or administrators that you worked with?
Well, it was John Maroka, Charlie Swenson, Steve Howland, Bob Tagner.
Okay.
Let's see, who else was there? I'm trying to think of some of the other people.
Oh, sure.
You know.
Let me ask you if besides the teaching assignments, were there other assignments that you had or other activities that you volunteered to?
Well,
like quote unquote volunteered to.
Oh, well,
during those early years.
Yeah, I helped out. We started a judo club, which I helped out with, and things like that.
Yes.
For a very, very short period of time, I did a stint in as an administrator in the Sonderling building.
Okay. You mentioned being involved with a judo club, but you still are interested in some of the Eastern arts, are you?
I still take kung fu, but that's just for me now.
Okay.
I don't.
All right.
And it's a way for me to relax.
And I remember you doing Tai Chi on a regular basis.
Well, kung fu is not Tai Chi.
It's a different it is. Okay.
Type of art.
Walter, did your training that you got at Post and prepare you think, for the classroom and for your teaching?
It's kind of strange because I went to other schools besides Post.
Oh, where'd you go?
Well, I took courses. I went to NYU.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I took a course at NYU. I took a course at Dowling. I took a course at I took a couple of courses at Hofstra. A few here and there. And I found that Post was the most demanding, surprisingly, and yet it has the weakest reputation.
Isn't that interesting?
Right.
So it was Post that prepared you more than any other?
I would say yes. Yeah. Yes, definitely so.
Do you, have you maintained any contact with any students, or have any students maintain contact with you once you leave at the end of the year? They're
interesting. There's a youngster by the name of no longer youngster, ex-student. His name was Maurice McIntyre. Maurice is about 6'4", black youngster. I keep saying youngster.
Yes, I know. Oh,
and
sure.
He's originally from Jamaica. And last year, I took a cruise, and one of the stops was Jamaica. And out of the clear blue sky, Maurice wrote to me. And so we met when the boat docked at Jamaica, and he took us around. So
isn't that one?
We didn't do we did some of the touristy things. Yes. But it was somebody, and he spoke pate, and that brought us to his home.
Wow.
But for the most part, no. I have purposely, and I don't know whether this is good or bad, with 2 or 3 exceptions, Maurice was one of them, tried to keep my private life separate from my career life.
Yes. Yeah. So then the question that I was about to ask may have answered itself. Do you maintain a social contact with colleagues outside of the classroom, either past or present colleagues?
Yes,
Okay.
colleagues, yes. I'm socially friendly with Joe Palazzolo,
Mm-hmm.
who probably will join us in retirement next year.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Brett, who you are
Yes.
very familiar with, Harvey Brickman. Unfortunately, Harvey's now in a nursing home.
Is he? Where?
And he's
Where
not
is
doing
he?
well.
Where is he?
They just moved him to the Gerwin nursing home.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
Yeah, which is on Hop Road in Comac. And his prognosis is not good at all.
Oh, how sad.
In fact, we went up Monday. Joe Palazzolo, Sandy Chase, and I went to visit him Monday. And I try to get over to him. I've gotten over to him about once a week because he's really starved for,
What is his condition, if you don't mind my asking? Okay, it's not good.
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about your affiliation with BTA. And
Okay.
When you first began to work here, did you join BTA right away? Were you?
No, because it wasn't there.
It wasn't there. That's right.
We had an
too.
association.
That's right too.
It was not a union.
That's
It was an association. And I joined because it was there. I mean,
Yes.
everybody said join, so I joined. It was, I was not really active in it, I would say, for about 10 years until I came to the high school, and even after that. Because when I came into the high school, there was something called the Jerebic Bill, if you remember, where you had to start a new tenure area.
Okay.
At least that's what they claimed.
Yeah, talk about it a little bit, because I'm not
With the
familiar.
Jerebic Bill?
Yes.
What had happened was I was basically a business teacher, and once in a while they would give me a social studies class. But around March or possibly April, they took the business courses out of the junior high completely. They just said, we're not teaching business down here anymore. And there's a good possibility you're going to be terminated. You won't have a job. Well, I had 2 children already and the house, and I was pretty upset about it.
You bet.
So finally, the union actually went to bat for me, which I was very, very happy about at the time because it was very stressful. And
By that time, it was nice. So we did have a union at that point. Then you're saying, or was it?
Jack Zuckerman had just become
President.
or he was about to become president, and Farina was giving up the presidency.
Okay.
That's
the time
that's
frame.
the time frame.
Okay.
And so I came up to the high school. Oh, by the way, I had a lot of good people who put in good word for me, and 1 or 2 that put in a bad word too.
Mm-hmm.
But Fred Weaver helped me a lot, and Tony helped me a lot. Not Tony,
DeMarco.
Tony DeMarco helped me a lot. And there were others, And so I came up to the high school, and because of the change in the law, which was called, I believe, the Jerebic Bill, they claimed that, which went to court, and they won it. But at that time, it takes a long time to get to court. They claimed that since I had been in the junior high and came to the high school, I had to start a new tenure area. A new tenure period, not area, new tenure period. And things worked out all right.
Yes.
Things worked out all right. And so it was after my tenure period, a year or 2 after my tenure period, that I started getting involved in the union. And for about a year, I was on the executive council. The last couple of years I was, and even before that, there was a big gap in between. I acted as the grievance chairman for first the Sondling building, and for the last 2 years for the Ross building.
Well, you had somehow a family history of unionism too, in your.
Well, my grandfather.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's right. Sure.
Yeah.
But so that the organization then has been good to your family and to yourself through.
I have no complaints about the union.
Let me ask you this, Walter. Has your opinion of unionism changed over the years in any respect?
Yeah, I believe it or not, the idea of unionism has gotten stronger rather than weaker.
And here we are.
I think we should be more militant, right? Which is something that I try to do here. That doesn't always work.
Yes, yes.
Unfortunately, teachers are not the most militant people in the world. Or maybe that's fortunate.
Is there a chapter from your professional life that you think should not be forgotten? A certain a segment of your professional career that you think is important to remember or that people should know about?
Well, I mentioned about how the union helped me with this bill, and I think
Now you became more active after that in the union. You mentioned.
well, because after the tenure area,
Yes.
after I had finished my new tenure period,
Right.
I had tenure before, and I had to start over again. I found that for the most part, the central administration has been okay. I've also found that at least lately, on the building level, there have been 2 or 3 administrators who are less than candid and who seem to be very controlling.
That's counterproductive. Yeah.
So I would say to anybody who's starting, be careful of yourself. And yet, for instance, I was with Harvey Brickman for a while, and he's a prince.
Yes.
I was with Ruth Rosenthal when she was an assistant principal. But these are the old timers, and I think that
Did you work with Steve Holland too?
No.
Did you?
No.
John Roca, you mentioned.
Yes,
John. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked for him, not with him.
Okay.
But
yes,
I would say to any new teacher, just be careful of what you do and be very jealous of what you have, because you don't realize what we've gone through to get it.
Amen to that. Yes. Who were some of the more active union people that you worked with during your tenure with the Executive Council and BTA?
Well, I worked with Jack,
Jack
Zuckerman, Tom Dwyer, Maddie, I think, was there also.
Okay.
Rachel, I believe, was there. Rachel Barr. I think Jerry Brophy.
Of the people that you're mentioning, or perhaps others that you haven't mentioned, was there somebody who did something that you really admired? Something of note that, or a position or a stand that they took that you recall as being admirable?
Helping me when I needed it.
Okay. Now, this 1998 will be the year of your retirement.
Yeah.
Walter, of all the things that you've done, what are you most proud of as a professional?
As a professional. Something happened, because sometimes, you never know whether you're doing the right thing or not, because we don't get feedback usually. And I met a kid many years ago who had a very strange tale. And he said, "Do you remember you made us stand for the pledge?" He said, "You made everybody stand for the pledge," which is one of my things.
Sure.
And I didn't remember this kid. I really didn't remember him. And he said, "That meant so much to me because my father had been killed in the Army." He said, "And I never forgot that." Yeah. So maybe I've had some positive influence on some of my students. I hope so.
Oh, for sure.
I hope so.
And as you said, the tough part is very often you never hear or you don't know the influence that you had.
Right.
Your last assignment was in which of the buildings now?
The Ross.
It's Ross.
Okay. Center.
And so you taught in the English department and this.
No, I taught in the business department.
I mean, what did I say? English. Business. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. Have there been, over the course of these 35 years, have there been second jobs that you had? What have you done?
Loads of second jobs.
What are some of the things that you've done?
Well, I've always taught night school. I've always taught summer school.
All right.
I've
Wow. So you went round.
Oh, yeah. I've been an
block.
apprentice butcher. I sold shoes. I think I mentioned for a while I was working on washing machines and dryers.
Yes.
Trying to think of what else I did.
Yeah.
But, you know.
You've been around the block.
Well,
In terms of second
Joe,
job.
what it was is I would have smuggled diamonds. But I couldn't do the time, so I figured I better just go to work.
Is 35 years, that's the total amount of years that you have been in education?
No,
More?
35 in Brentwood and 1
Oh,
year upstate. So I've
okay.
actually been in 36.
6 years. Do you remember how much you made your first year?
Yes, I do.
How much was that?
$5,200 for the year, and I was paid on the master's level.
And that was before taxes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And I remember saying, "Oh, $10,000, man!
Yeah,
we were
Yes.
yachts."
What brought you to the decision that you made to retire?
Well, there's a couple of things. I had intended to stay 1 more year and then retire. Want to leave while I still feel good about teaching, while I still feel good about doing what I'm doing. And the other factor is pure and simple economics.
Yeah.
As you know, if you take maximum, which I will be taking, it's 2% a year. For every year you're there with a maximum of 75%. Well, next year I would have hit 74, and I said, it's getting time. And this year, with the incentive that the district was able to take, it brought me up to 78%, and I crunched the numbers. And I said, net, if everything being equal, and I state next year I'll make $4,000 more, but when I retire, I make $4,000 less a year for every year I live. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So economically, it just,
Didn't make sense to do anything.
no. And if I can teach night school, there's the $4,000.
Sure.
So I pushed it up a year.
Now, was there anything that you would like to have accomplished before you retired that you didn't get to do? You crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's.
Pretty much.
Good. Great.
Pretty much. In some ways, I'm very glad that it happened. In some ways, I'm very sorry it happened. I probably would have enjoyed staying in administration longer than I did. However, looking at the administration now, I'm not so sure that I would enjoy it as much, because I don't see them as ethical as they used to be, and they may be forced to do things that I really would not want to do. Now, 15 years ago, that may not have been the case.
Would, let me phrase it this way. How would you like to be remembered by your colleagues when they talk about Walter and they think about Walter Karp? How would you hope?
Eventually, I think there's an old Jewish saying, there's always an old Jewish story.
Yes, that's true.
And it goes like this. You fill the glass up with half filled with water, and you put your finger in it, and you take your finger out. Does anybody know your finger was there?
So
I hope my friends remember me in a positive way. I hope my enemies remember me and eat their heart out. And I think
what about your kids? What about the students? What about your students?
I hope they look back and say, I learned something. I learned something that helps me for the rest of my life. That's how I would like to be remembered by my students.
Now let's wax a little bit philosophical here in terms of the changes that you see in the immediate future for public schools. What do you see coming down the road?
With the new changes, what I see is
New changes meaning
the new regions action plan. I see things getting more difficult for kids as far as the standards. I also see a lot of youngsters failing for about 4 or 5 years. And then I think they're going to say, too many kids are failing, so we'll go back to the old way. And I don't think it's going to stick. And I think that these kids that are failing are going to get hurt. I think there was a better way of doing things. At least, do you also see the cream of the crop being skimmed off public education and going into the private schools and these, what do you call the schools?
Magnet schools,
Magnet schools, or alternative schools, or whatever. I see them as skimming off more of our better students. And so what you're going to be left with are the kids that are not doing or are not prepared as well. And not every kid has the same IQ. I mean, there's some kids that are not going to do too well. And I think that's what we're going to have. And then they're going to point the finger at us and say, see, we told you couldn't do so well.
So you think this, for the immediate future, for students of this district, there are going to be rough times coming for a few years?
I think so.
That would also follow then. I guess there's going to be some rough times for the people who are working with him.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think teachers are going to bear the brunt of it.
Is there something, that aside now, that you are looking forward to doing now that you will be the boss of your own life? You will make your decisions. Is there something that you've been, you mentioned that you haven't had enough time to read?
I'd like to do some reading.
Yeah.
Probably the year after this. I'd love to see Alaska. I want to go on that.
Great.
I want to go on that tour
Cruise,
the tour cruise.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that the Teachers Association will have one there.
Well, retirees are traveling someplace every year.
Yeah,
right.
So I would love to go there. I'd also, I think it's going to be a big change for me, and one that I'm not yet prepared for, because I pushed everything up a year, and I was just starting to think about it.
Okay.
It was
time to catch up.
I was thinking of maybe going back to school, to Suffolk Community, and possibly they have a 2-year program. They have 2 of them that I would be interested in. One is to become an interpreter for deaf people.
Wonderful.
And the other one is to learn to be an optician, to grind lenses. I don't know whether I'm going to do that. I might just decide to sit around and do nothing. And I think for a couple of months, that's what I'm going to do until I really,
very wise,
decide what I want.
While you were working all of these years, what about that time gave you the most pleasure?
Actually, my family.
Mm-hmm.
My family life was the most important thing.
That's precious, yeah.
My kids. One of the reasons I worked all those jobs was so that I could give them the things that I thought they needed.
What a wonderful thing to be able to say to them, because that's what you've just done as they see this tape.
Well, I would never tell.
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful thought. If you had your life to live over again, Walter, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I tell you the truth, as far as teaching goes, I had a lot of fun for a lot of years. And it wasn't until the last couple of years that we made a living.
Yes.
I don't know that I would do it again because of the money.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of fun, but I might have stayed with the accounting because it's much more lucrative.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a struggle.
Yeah.
It has. I'm not going to ask you what you're going to miss the most about active service, because you're going to continue to be active. You're going to be doing summer school. You'll be doing evening school. So
I hope so.
You will have the best of both worlds in the sense that you will be retired, but you will be active.
Well, there's a number of people in night school that are doing that.
Yes.
Henry Mateus, for instance, has been, and Carol Perchik.
Oh, it's a wonderful decision.
So
is there, we were talking before about changes in the public schools. I want to ask you about the profession. Do you see changes ahead for the teaching profession? Do you think this fall about tenure will go anywhere? Do you think the new bar, raising the bar, is going to affect the profession in any way?
Well, I know what I would like to happen.
What's that?
I would like teachers to be able to limit the amount of people who come into the profession, as physicians do, as attorneys do through through their bar exams. And again, it's supply and demand. And I think that with that, we would do a lot better.
That would be
that happening.
if the profession had sway over those
Right.
entrance exams.
I
Right
don't
now,
see
the
that
federal
happening.
government is looking to have.
I don't see that happening at all. But for instance, who marks the exams that the physicians take? Other physicians.
Yes, exactly right.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Same thing with accounting, and the same thing with law. So they can limit their numbers. I don't see that happening, however. With the new idea of renewable certification, I see that as a very dangerous thing, because I don't see it as a boon to people who really want to do a good job. I see it as a tool for an administrator who doesn't like what a teacher may say. And now, not only have you lost your job, but it's very possible you will lose your career because that's your license. And I find that as a very dangerous thing. Will it work out that way? I hope not, but I think it will.
We're down near the end of our time together, so I have a couple more that I want to just shoot across your bow here. One of them is this. The year is 1998. We're 2 years away now from the millennium. An election coming up very shortly. We have a myriad of changes facing our culture, our society. Is there something that you see as one of the most important issues facing the American society as you leave the teaching profession?
Yeah, I see a couple of issues. One is the change from technology to communication as far as our workforce. Right? The other thing that I see is the large number of immigration, which also affects the workforce. And the third thing that I see is the globalness of companies. All right. How can an American worker who wants a decent wage compete against the person in China who's willing to pay or work for pennies?
Yes.
Pennies. So I see our standard of living is diminishing, and that bothers me a lot.
You certainly have seen the impact of changing immigration patterns throughout your tenure as a teacher too, as a number of
and
language groups.
Whether it's good or bad, their behavior, their ideas are different than mine. And I'm not saying that it's better or worse, because some are better and some are worse, but they are different. Does that make me chauvinistic? Probably. Probably, but I admit it.
It makes you human, because change is difficult for anybody when it comes at a certain pace and at a certain rate.
Well, I even see it here in the halls,
Sure.
where some of the youngsters from Latin America do not have the same idea about violence that we do, and they're much more aggressive.
Yeah, cultural values are different.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Is there anything that I forgot to ask you, Walt, that I should have asked?
I think I just opened myself up and
I did too,
and spilt my guts.
Well, I hope you don't feel that that's what you did. I think.
Well, I don't mean it in a negative way.
Yeah, I think it was a wonderful picture of who you are and what you've done and the service that you've given to this district and to the kids and to the people of Brentwood. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave any page unturned before we conclude, just in case there was anything you wanted to add to what we've already said.
The only thing I'd like to add is I hope that whoever goes into teaching has as much fun as I did. Right? I don't mean that everything was good. A lot of it was not so great, but for the most part, I had fun and I enjoyed it, and that was important. And I felt like I did something that was worthwhile.
Walter Karp, you're a very lucky man. And
I
it's
hope
a
so.
wonderful thing to be able to say after 36 years
I hope so.
of toiling in the fields, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.